The world has witnessed the rise of numerous dictators whose regimes were marked by extreme brutality, widespread repression, and mass atrocities. These leaders wielded their power with ruthless efficiency, often pursuing radical ideologies that led to immense human suffering. Their reigns of terror resulted in the deaths of millions, with their actions leaving deep scars on the societies they ruled. They enforced their will through a combination of fear, propaganda, and relentless suppression of dissent, transforming their nations into totalitarian states where basic human rights were denied. Their policies often included ethnic cleansing, forced labor, and aggressive military campaigns, exacerbating the devastation they caused both domestically and internationally. Augusto Pinochet, the military dictator of Chile from 1973 to 1990, seized power through a violent coup that ousted the democratically elected president, Salvador Allende. Pinochet's regime was marked by widespread human rights abuses, including the torture, disappearance, and execution of thousands of political opponents. His policies of economic liberalization, while initially stabilizing the economy, were implemented with brutal force and disregard for human suffering. Pinochet's legacy is controversial, with supporters crediting him for economic reforms and detractors condemning his ruthless suppression of dissent and violation of human rights. His dictatorship remains a dark period in Chilean history, characterized by fear, oppression, and a profound impact on the nation's political and social fabric. Francisco Franco, the military dictator of Spain from 1939 until his death in 1975, ruled through a repressive and authoritarian regime established after his victory in the Spanish Civil War. Franco's government was characterized by censorship, political repression, and the suppression of regional identities. Tens of thousands of political opponents were executed or imprisoned during and after the Civil War, and many more were subject to forced labor and other forms of persecution. Franco maintained his power through a combination of military strength, propaganda, and alliances with conservative and religious institutions. His rule left a legacy of division and trauma in Spain, with the country transitioning to democracy only after his death. Benito Mussolini, the fascist leader of Italy from 1922 to 1943, established a totalitarian regime that suppressed political opposition, controlled the media, and promoted aggressive nationalism. Mussolini's ambition to create a new Roman Empire led to the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935 and the alliance with Nazi Germany during World War II. His policies contributed to widespread suffering, including the brutal repression of dissent and the implementation of anti-Semitic laws. Mussolini's regime promoted militarism and expansionism, ultimately leading to Italy's defeat and his execution by Italian partisans in 1945. His legacy is one of dictatorial control, war, and the suffering of countless individuals under his rule. Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq from 1979 to 2003, is remembered for his ruthless authoritarian rule and numerous atrocities. His regime was marked by severe repression, including the use of chemical weapons against Kurdish civilians in Halabja in 1988, resulting in thousands of deaths. Saddam's aggressive policies led to the Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 1988, and the invasion of Kuwait in 1990, triggering the Gulf War. His government maintained power through fear, utilizing a vast security apparatus to eliminate dissent and opposition. The U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 ended Saddam's regime, revealing further evidence of mass graves and human rights abuses, cementing his legacy as a brutal dictator. Idi Amin, the military dictator of Uganda from 1971 to 1979, is notorious for his brutal and erratic rule. Amin seized power through a military coup and established a reign of terror characterized by gross human rights abuses, political repression, and ethnic persecution. His expulsion of Asians from Uganda in 1972 led to economic chaos. Amin's regime was marked by widespread extrajudicial killings, with estimates of 300,000 to 500,000 people murdered. His brutal tactics included torture and arbitrary arrests, instilling fear across the nation. Amin's downfall came in 1979 when Tanzanian forces, along with Ugandan exiles, invaded and ousted him, ending one of Africa's most infamous dictatorships. Kim Il-sung. Kim, the founder and first supreme leader of North Korea, ruled from 1948 until his death in 1994. His totalitarian regime established one of the most repressive states in the world, characterized by a personality cult, severe human rights abuses, and a rigid command economy. Kim's policies led to widespread poverty, famine, and isolation from the global community. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, initiated by Kim's invasion of South Korea, resulted in millions of deaths and immense destruction. His government maintained strict control over all aspects of life, using propaganda, surveillance, and brutal punishment for dissent. The oppressive regime he established continues under his descendants, perpetuating suffering for millions of North Koreans. Pol Pot. Pol, the leader of the Khmer Rouge and Prime Minister of Cambodia from 1975 to 1979, presided over one of the most brutal genocides in modern history. His radical communist policies aimed to transform Cambodia into an agrarian utopia, resulting in the forced evacuation of cities, execution of perceived enemies, and harsh labor conditions in rural collectives. An estimated 1.7 to 2 million people, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population, died from execution, forced labor, starvation, and disease. Pol Pot's regime was characterized by extreme cruelty, anti-intellectualism, and a complete disregard for human life. The aftermath of his rule left Cambodia devastated and scarred by the memories of the killing fields. Joseph Stalin. Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union from the mid-1920s until his death in 1953, orchestrated a regime marked by extreme repression and mass murder. Stalin's policies, including forced collectivization and industrialization, led to widespread famine, most notably the Ukrainian Holodomor, which killed millions. His Great Purge of the 1930s targeted political rivals, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens, resulting in the execution and imprisonment of hundreds of thousands. Stalin's totalitarian rule was characterized by widespread fear, propaganda, and a brutal police state. His actions during and after World War II further solidified his infamy, contributing to the deaths and suffering of millions through forced labor camps, gulags, and harsh reprisals against perceived enemies. Mao Zedong. Mao, the founding father of the People's Republic of China, ruled from 1949 until his death in 1976. His tenure is infamous for catastrophic policies like the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. The Great Leap Forward, aimed at rapidly transforming China into a socialist society through collectivization and industrialization, resulted in one of the deadliest famines in history, with estimates of 30 to 45 million deaths. The Cultural Revolution, intended to preserve communist ideology, led to widespread persecution, destruction of cultural heritage, and millions of deaths. Mao's regime was marked by extreme authoritarianism, mass mobilization campaigns, and brutal suppression of dissent, leaving a legacy of immense human suffering. Adolf Hitler. Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany from 1934 to 1945, is widely regarded as one of the most evil dictators in history. His rise to power began with his appointment as Chancellor in 1933, followed by his establishment of a totalitarian regime. Hitler's policies of Aryan racial superiority led to the Holocaust, the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others deemed undesirable, including Romani people, disabled individuals, and political dissidents. His aggressive expansionist policies initiated World War II, causing unprecedented destruction and loss of life across Europe. Hitler's ruthless leadership, marked by propaganda, oppression, and militarism, resulted in the deaths of an estimated 70 million people, leaving a legacy of profound horror and devastation. Thanks for watching, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below.